Welcome to the new For Purpose CEO podcast.
I'm Michelle.
I am Danielle, and we are here to talk about being a CEO in the for purpose sector. Each episode, we will talk about issues not-for-profit and for-purpose CEOs need to manage based on our 30 plus years of experience. It will be an honest discussion of the highs and the lows, helping you tackle the unique challenges of running a NFP.
Leading can be challenging and sometimes lonely. We get it. Join us and our guests weekly for an honest discussion about running a for-purpose organisation. We will be sharing practical tips, shared experiences and real-world stories to help you tackle the unique challenges of running a for-purpose organisation. Hello. Today we thought we'd talk about the CEO relationship with the chair. And it's so funny because we were literally just chatting beforehand and we have actually quite different experiences of this in terms of how chairs want to work, how often CEOs meet with chairs. I just think it's really interesting that we've really got quite different experience and how we've worked previously with our chairs. I think that's probably indicative of the wide range of options there could be.
That's right. Your personal style, the chair's personal style, what's going on with the organisation at the time that's driving the relationship and frequency of meetings or what you talk about, the variables you're working with. But if you were an incoming CEO, so you were just starting, whether you're a new CEO or new CEO to that organisation, the very first important thing is to establish with the chair what that rhythm should or could be and what you both expect to be doing in those discussions, coming to them together.
Yeah. The first question is obviously how do you like to work? And I think that's going to depend. But I mean, I've often had chairs who want to do quite regular catch-ups between meetings. And, you know, if you've got something going on, you've got a lot of things going on or you're in some form of crisis, then absolutely you might talk every day. But I guess a lot of the chairs I've worked with is we normally end up touching base, at least weekly. Whereas I think you were saying you actually would not touch base weekly.
No. So my sort of experience is having a structured monthly meeting with my chair, whether it be face-to-face or obviously now on video, so Zoom or Teams. And we both actually come with an agenda of items. But the driving force of us coming together at that each month actually is firstly the board agenda and finalising the board agenda, and that tends to drive it. We certainly have telephone calls.
About issues or as a check-in?
About issues. So where I need to or where she needs to raise sort of okay, this is what's going to come up at the board meeting, or I need to let you know this has happened and I need to sort of present my paper this way. But it's not as regular as your experience. So
I don't know. Maybe I've always had things going on. I mean, it just seems that, well, and probably also depends on the chair, right? If you've got a chair who is either really interested in the organisation or possibly in the sector, they might be having more of a conversation around anything that's happening. I think, it depends on how hands-on they are. And this is not at all to kind of assume that they're getting operational. Absolutely not. It's really to check in with what's happening, if there's any developments. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's not every week, but there have been lots of periods in my life where, as a CEO, I had a weekly check-in.
What kinds of conversations would you have in a weekly?
I think a lot of it is to make sure the chair is across. So if you're newer into the role, the chair's checking how you're going. So it could be a bit of a check-in with you. How's things going? Is there anything that the chair could help you put into context? Be a bit of a sounding board. And then I think when you're possibly a bit more experienced, let's say it might move to every 2 weeks, which would be, again, I guess, checking in, making sure nothing's come up, there's, no issues with, for example, a particular project or stakeholder. But I definitely would say that I have usually had it's normally a phone call check-in rather than a face-to-face meeting in between board meetings. a bit more of a conversation around what's happening and, keep them updated. Absolutely, yes, set the agenda, make sure they know what's in the board papers. I think I've normally had phone calls with chairs as a CEO more regularly than once a month.
Once a month, yeah. I was thinking when you were talking about them, like I had more regular check-ins, say, for example, through COVID, because we were all in a state of what do we all do to get through this? Yeah, that's right. And, what emerging issues do we think are actually going to come up? And I think it's also dependent on like how busy your chair is as well. So you could have a chair who works full time, also has an incredibly demanding job, and their capacity is really quite small. I was talking to a CEO a couple of weeks ago, and they were telling me about how their chair travels overseas really regularly. And I remember sort of saying, well, how do you end up having those important conversations with your chair? Do you have a structure? And like they were actually struggled to find a structure with their chair because of the chair's career, their position.
I think that's hard. Hard.
And what that actually meant was that the CEO was often having telephone calls with the chair either really, really early in the morning or much later at night as well, and they just had to find a rhythm. But they did. They worked together to find that. They both recognised the challenges.
You obviously have to work with your chair, right? So if they're travelling, right? But ideally, I guess you try and set up a regular time, like that, you have a regular every 2 weeks. I mean, COVID, I think we probably were chatting every day depending on what was going on, but a bit of a set time so you can plan it as well.
I like a good operating rhythm at the beginning of the year. It's in everybody's diary. It's not to say you can't have flexibility and if you need to change, that's fine. But what you both have done is in that moment, you've both have actually committed to the time and the approach and the style. What changes is what do you talk about at that time? But it's there. If you need more, you can put more in, but you're not necessarily each month trying to struggle to find time.
Yeah. And if you need less, right? Like if you're talking every 2 weeks and you actually just, even if you don't need to check in, you might actually say we don't need it, or you might have a much shorter update. I think really the value is to use them as a bit of a sounding board. And it might be that, it depends as well on how active the committees you have are, or if you have committees. If you're a smaller organisation, you might not, because it might be that you're actually also working closely with committees, and that's where you can leverage expertise that's on the board in relation to particular issues that come up for you in projects, programs, strategic initiatives. It could be that those issues are worked through a committee first rather than the chair.
But you would keep your chair informed of the progress of that.
Yeah, if a big issue came up, but not
the detail of every committee. No, absolutely not. The chair's letting the committee deal with that. But I like to keep the chair just so there's continuity as well. So because also the chair is thinking about what's going on across the board and the organisation, because they also need to know how they're going to nuance or lead a discussion or a focus at a board meeting.
Yeah. And I think one of the things then is to try and get across the communicating style of the chair as well. Like some people take information in and listen to information and want information a different way, and really to try and match that. So are they big picture? Do they want a bit of background? Do they want detail? Like how do they actually want you to deliver information in these updates? And bearing in mind this is not a board report, this is literally a check-in or an update in between board meetings, and try and get really clear what the chair is expecting in these updates and how they like to run them, work them, and what you need as a CEO. I think as well, you've really got to think like, what are you hoping to use the chair for in these interactions? Because people are busy, right? Time is precious, so really get clear on what you want. I mean, you raised an interesting issue before, which was if you think there's an issue with a board member, or you think someone might not be engaged or might not be reading the papers, or they're missing board meetings, which sometimes can happen, but to raise that with the chair. I mean, I would say I would strongly recommend that if there are issues, you speak to the chair rather than go direct to a board member. But I think, boardroom behaviour, that's for the chair to manage, not the CEO.
Absolutely. But I've also had the experience, definitely as CEO, don't get involved in that. But you might, as a CEO, you might have observations that you want to have a discussion with the chair about, because you need the role of the chair to intervene and or guide you, or you work together about how you move through a particular matter. If it's another director is not reading the papers or is not presenting as engaged or not participating, the way other directors are, etc. I certainly take the position of I will present observations to the chair, and I will leave that for the chair to manage in a way that they feel it is best managed. But in my experience, I've also had the chair use me as a sounding board on those matters where they
interaction and boardroom dynamics and that kind of thing.
Exactly, because as a CEO, if you do have multiple committees, there are board committees and the board meetings, etc. As a CEO, you might sit in all or most of those committees as a management representation to answer questions, present positions. You have a bit of continuity about what you're seeing and if there are themes or trends. And so I've certainly had chairs in the past who have used me as a sounding board or who have asked for my perspective on something. I will present it, but I certainly won't intervene on it.
Yeah. And the other thing to think is often the chair is also, there might be someone long-standing in the sector who's got a lot of experience in the sector. So, as a CEO, you can really learn a lot from your chair as well. So to really leverage their experience, their strengths, their knowledge, and really, take advantage of the opportunity that they present to you as a CEO, which I think, is often the case.
I think that is one of the best things about the chair's role is that if you're a CEO with a really, because the other thing we've got to think about here is CEOs run their boards really differently. They see their relationship with their board very differently to each other. There are some CEOs who like to run their board.
I kind of don't like that, right? Like you don't run the board. So you're not on the board. You don't run the board. You report to the board.
And you need to respect the role of the board.
Oh my God, absolutely. And you report to the board. You are able to hopefully leverage their expertise.
Well, that's the value of a board to me, apart from obviously sort of the corporate compliance and those sorts of things and the accountability, is that if you've got a really strong chair and you've got a really strong board, as the CEO, you see that opportunity as the CEO to say, I've got this really good chair who's incredibly skilled, who's in this position for a reason. What am I going to learn from this person? What kind of skills can I observe? Can I gain? Can I be challenged on as the CEO in my relationship with the chair, and being really open to that and taking that for what that is and seeing that really constructively. And you, as a CEO in your career, will have various different chairs with various different bents. Some chairs are really collaborative, some are more command control style, some are a little bit more hands off, some take very strong leadership positions, some want to get in the trenches with you.
But also the other thing is, and I was just sitting here thinking, often the board broadly and the CEO in particular will actually have a really great relationship with a lot of your key stakeholders, right? Like if they've been in the sector for a long time, then that's the other thing that I think the CEO can talk to the chair about, which is how do I, as the CEO, leverage the good relationships that exist with our stakeholders that are held by the various board members? Like how do we set the relationships up for the benefit of the organisation? And I think that's a really good conversation to have with the chair. Like how do you tap into the different expertise and experience and relationships that the different board members have?
Yeah, definitely. And whether that, is for a charity, some people have that as part of their philanthropic strategy and they specifically have directors on their board for that, or particular, have specific chairs on their board who can bring that value to the organisation as well. And or whether it be business to government and what networks and relationships do you have at government or other funders. or other stakeholders that you're wanting to influence, and your chair can take a very, very active role to leverage that across the board, but you have to have that kind of conversation with your chair and understand what is needed and get them to sort of help you leverage that for the organisation. But it is a relatively unique relationship between CEO and chair. It's a trusted relationship between CEO and chair, needs to be a trusted relationship.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, right? Like any relationship, but this is a really key one. So as a new CEO, get to know your chair, how they work, how often they want to speak with you, make sure you're able to leverage their skills and experience. And it could be such a great relationship. Like it can be really personally and professionally rewarding. I've had some great chairs that, I'm still in touch with, and it's really important, I think, to get on top of it also really quickly. Right? Like it's one of the key relationships you have to get on top of really early.
And set that expectation between the two of you as quickly as you can. Absolutely. I do that as soon as the chair is appointed. Each organisation has different processes from how the board appoints the chair, but once that appointment's made, that's the very first thing
you're on the
do
phone
as a CEO. Pretty much. And having that conversation, how do you like to work? This is how I work. These are the systems that I've already got in place. Does that suit your needs?
There's no right or wrong. I think that's the other thing, right? There's no right or wrong. You can work it out what works for both of you.
But you need to have that conversation and that discussion straight up rather than just trying to work it out as you go. And in some ways, your chair can be your greatest ally. I've had chairs that have just been a great supporter of me and have been really appreciative of that, and has really helped me both as a leader, both in terms of working with a board, both from a commercial perspective. But that's because we set the rules of engagement really fast.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to ask questions of the chair is, I'm thinking here about the board papers, is to really get feedback and seek feedback on, ask a lot of questions, get feedback on the papers. Are they fit for purpose from the board's perspective? But get feedback on everything. Get feedback on how you appear at a board meeting. Get feedback on how you answer questions. So it's a real source of learning for you in terms of your own professional development as well. So hopefully you have a chair who's comfortable giving that kind of feedback. I think really try and leverage their experience.
Yes, don't ever underestimate your relationship with your chair. As we said, getting there early, start to set and seek expectations of that relationship, how frequently you touch base with each other, whether it's informal, whether it's formal. Continue to get feedback from them so you know as a CEO how you're actually performing in your role. Use it to be able to, as a sounding board for you. They'll use you as a bit of a sounding board as well. But the stronger the relationship, I think the more effective the CEO's relationship with the broader board is.
Yeah, absolutely. Great summary.